Hungarian Folk Tales. The Little Pig and the Wolves. Once upon a time, there was a little pig who lived in a little house in the middle of a vast forest. The little pig was cooking supper one day when a scruffy wolf knocked on his door. Little pig, let me in. It's so cold out here, I'll freeze to death. No, I won't let you in because you'll eat me up. Just let my back leg in or I'll freeze to death. The little pig put a big pot of water to boil on the fire, and then he let the wolf's back leg into the house. Oh, little pig, please let my other back leg in too. Little pig, please let my 2 front feet in now. The little pig let the wolf's 2 front feet in, but the scruffy wolf still wasn't happy. Little pig, please let all of me in, and I promise I won't hurt a hair on your head. The little pig found a sack and held it open so that the wolf would walk right into it. And that's what he did. The little pig wasted no time and tied the sack up in a flash. Then he took the pot off the fire and poured boiling water all over the wolf. The steaming hot water made the wolf shout, and he wriggled and jiggled until he pushed the sack open. The bold, scolded wolf jumped out of the sack and saw the little pig sitting at the top of the tree. And the wolf ran off to find help. The bold, scolded wolf eventually returned with the other wolves. The wolves thought and thought about how they would catch the little pig, as none of them could climb a tree. At long last, they decided to stand on one another's shoulders until they reached the little pig. The wolves climbed quickly one on top of the other. The bold, scolded wolf stayed at the bottom because he was afraid of heights, so the others all climbed on top of him. The Tower of Wolves reached up to the sky until they only needed one more wolf on the top. The last wolf started to climb, and the little pig shouted, "Pour hot water on the bold one!" The bold, scolded wolf leapt out from the bottom of the pile and ran as fast as his legs could carry him. The wolves tumbled to the ground in a heap of furry bones. Then all the little piglet had to do was to jump down from the tree and go back into his little house. And the bad wolves never dared come near again. Hungarian Folk Tales. The Pussycat Princess. Once upon a time there lived a king, and the king had 3 sons. All 3 princes were of marrying age, and so their father told them to find themselves wives. He threw 3 sticks in the air, 1 for each son, and said, "Wherever your stick falls is where you find your bride." The eldest son's stick fell towards a young baroness. The middle son's stick fell towards a young countess, while the youngest son's stick fell towards the dark forest. The young men all left the palace, but the youngest one was very sad. He had no idea how he would find a bride in the thick forest. And as he was walking in the forest, he met a small pussycat that walked behind him. The young prince spoke to the pussycat and said, "My royal father told me to travel to these parts where I would find my bride, but I can't see a girl anywhere near. Don't worry, I will marry you." The prince could not return home until he promised to marry the pussycat. The other princes had already arrived back, and their father asked them each what they thought of their bride. The eldest one said that he found a baroness, and the middle son said that he found a countess, while the youngest one asked them to wait and see. Then the king ordered all the 3 grooms to fetch a beautiful bouquet from their beloved. The 2 elder ones went happily, but the youngest one was very sad. When he reached the edge of the forest, the pussycat was already waiting for him. "My dear betrothed, you look so unhappy. Tell me, why are you so sad?" "How wouldn't I be sad when my royal father has ordered us all to bring a bouquet from our fiancés? Now what could I bring from a pussycat?" "Don't worry, just lie down and take a rest." Then the pussycat scratched a tree and many more pussycats appeared. One of them brought silver flowers, another golden flowers, and a third brought diamond flowers, and the bride arranged them all in a beautiful bouquet. The other 2 princes were already at home when the young prince arrived late. The king said that the bouquets were truly beautiful, but the most beautiful of all belonged to the youngest son. They all asked him to tell the name of his bride to be, but he asked them to wait and see. Days passed and soon became a week. when the king ordered his sons to go to their brides and fetch a handkerchief each. The young princes all left, but the youngest one was very sad. By the time he reached the edge of the forest, the pussycat was already waiting for him. "My dear betrothed, you look so unhappy. Tell me, why are you so sad?" "How wouldn't I be sad when my royal father has ordered us all to bring a handkerchief from our fiancés, but a pussycat cannot weave." "Don't worry, just lie down and take a rest." The pussycat scratched the tree, and once again more pussycats appeared. One brought silver yarn, another brought golden yarn, and a third gave diamond yarn, and the pussycat bride wove them together. When he arrived at the palace, the king inspected all 3 handkerchiefs. He told the eldest boys that theirs were quite pretty, but he told the youngest son that his was the prettiest of all. Weeks passed and soon became a month when the king told his sons to bring their fiancées to the palace. The 2 elder boys went happily for their spouses, while the youngest one became sadder than ever before. How could he possibly take the pussycat home? His pussycat bride was already waiting for him at the edge of the forest. "My dear betrothed, you look so unhappy. Tell me, why are you so sad?" "How wouldn't I be sad when my royal father has ordered us all to fetch our brides? Now how can I present a pussycat at the palace?" "Don't worry, just lie down and take a rest." The youngest prince thought he would never sleep, but at last he succumbed and fell into a slumber. When he awoke, he was very worried, but the young princess told him it was she in the guise of a pussycat whom he had betrothed, but she had been under a curse to live like that until a young man asked for her hand in marriage. "I was a pussycat, and you asked me to marry you, so I turned back into a princess." A wonderful coach awaited them, with proud coachmen and fine horses, so the prince sat in the carriage with his princess and travelled back to the palace in regal style. The wedding party was already underway at the palace when the guards came to the king and told him that a king had arrived from another country. When the young couple arrived, the king soon saw that they were his son and his beautiful bride. They were all amazed to discover that the youngest prince's bride was the most beautiful of them all. Then they all sang and danced and danced and sang until the wedding party was done. And this is where my story ends. Hungarian Folk Tales. The Poor Cobbler and the King of the Winds. There was once a poor cobbler who toiled all day and all night and had more children than there are holes in a sieve. One day he mended the shoes of a miller, who paid him with flour, and he was carrying the flour home when the wind blew all the flour away. "Well, that's too much. I'll go and find the King of the Winds to let him know it was heartless to take that sack of flour away from me." He made his way through many lands until he arrived at a beautiful meadow. There he saw a whirlwind approaching that blew the dust from the road up into a spiralling cloud. And the poor cobbler was so very afraid that he took his hat off and lay flat on the ground to save himself from the raging wind. "You are wise to recognize and bow down before my power," said the King of the Winds, "or else you would have fared much worse. Tell me, what brings you to this distant place?" "I came for compensation from you, your majesty. The other day I was paid a sack of flour, and I was just carrying it home when a youthful breeze blew it clean out of my hands, and now my family have no food to eat. Leave that to me. That wicked wind will suffer for its deeds, but I will not let you suffer any longer." So the king led the poor cobbler into his palace, where he fed him and gave him a magical lamb. Then he said, "When you arrive home, simply say, 'Shake yourself, O lamb,' and the lamb will shake off enough money to keep you for a month. But beware not to try this before you arrive home." The poor cobbler took leave from the King of the Winds and left for home. But his curiosity overcame him, and he simply had to see what the little lamb could do. As soon as he uttered the word of command, the ground around the lamb was showered with gold coins. He soon reached his lodgings for the night in the house of a very old friend, and he warned his friend never to say, "Shake yourself, O lamb." But the poor cobbler had hardly fallen asleep when his host and his wife ordered the beast, "Shake yourself, O lamb." When they saw the gold coins scatter on the ground, they took the animal and replaced it with a lamb from their own flock. The poor cobbler woke the next morning, but failed to notice the change. He thanked the man and his wife and left for home with high hopes in his heart. When he eventually arrived back, he said, "Shake yourself, O lamb." He repeated the order a number of times, but the little lamb simply stood and stared back at him. The cobbler then set off again to visit the King of the Winds, and he was very angry. He marched straight to the palace to voice his complaint. "I am sure you did not take my advice, and you must have spoken to the lamb before you reached home. But this time I will give you a tablecloth, and all you have to say is, 'Fill yourself with fine fare, O tablecloth,' and it will be covered in food. But do not be tempted to try this before you arrive home." But the poor cobbler was too curious again, and he tried the tablecloth. When evening came, he took lodging with his friend again, and he said to him, "You mustn't tell my tablecloth to fill itself with fine fare." The friend and his wife could hardly wait for the cobbler to sleep that night. They gave the order at once, and when they found out what a valuable tablecloth he had, they exchanged it for one of their own. The next day he arrived home and became terribly angry when he ordered the tablecloth again and again, but nothing happened. Again the poor cobbler travelled hastily back to see the King of the Winds, who was waiting for him when he arrived, and presented him with a small cane. He told him he should not tell the cane to "Turn around cleverly, O cane," before he arrived home again. The poor cobbler could barely wait to find out what the cane would do, and so he quickly said, "Turn around cleverly, O cane." The cane hopped up and began to beat him hard. The poor cobbler cried out in pain, "Stop!" and the clever cane stopped beating him at once. Now the poor cobbler knew what to do with the cane. On his way home, he stayed with his old friend again. He warned the man and his wife not to say, "Turn around cleverly, O cane." But his wife's friend woke her husband at midnight. They took the cane into their room and she said, "Turn around cleverly, O cane, once for me and once for my husband." The poor cobbler was quickly woken by their cries. "I told you not to address my cane, but it seems that you are the guilty one, so let it beat you as it will." "Oh, we promise to return both the lamb and the tablecloth." Then the poor cobbler ordered the cane to stop. But the friend and his wife did not wait for the cane to beat them again, and they hurried forth with the poor cobbler's lamb and his tablecloth, who took them home to his family, who never wanted for money or food again. And they all lived happily ever after.